Not so much a question, but just a couple of comments and observations I've made over time. One, self-managed super funds have had a fairly strong inroad into funding property, and it seems to me that the law of nature, or legislation as you might put it, which requires you to have a minimum payout per annum, the statutory minimum, will reach a point where they're so lumpy in terms of their assets that they're going to have to flog their property just to comply with the legislation on what they pay on superannuation. So I see that as another nail in the coffin for property. Beyond that, I've become unfortunately increasingly cynical of Australia as a I won't even call it a nation now. I think it's a landmass full of tribal self-seeking interest groups competing against each other for a slice of the pie, and that doesn't give me confidence in investing in Australia in the long term. I think it's changed dramatically, I think, over the last 40 or 50 years, which I've been around long enough to remember.
I'll actually answer that, even though it's not a question.
Probably agree with you,
yeah. I mean, I wrote a book on the GFC with Ross Garno, and I wasn't around in the 70s, at least not switched on about economics. And he told me then, like, he put the end of the book at the, this was like 2009. He said, "You're not going to want the conclusion I'm going to put in." And he said, as he came through the ranks as a public servant, Australia was incredibly stodgy and stagnant, completely rife with interests in the same way that you're describing. Protectionism everywhere, what have you. And he said, the act of bailing out the banks here is going to trigger the return of all of that. I spoke to him last week and he said it's so much worse now than it was in the 70s. So you're absolutely right, it is completely out of control. We have been there before. In fact, if you look at it over a sort of century time frame, you can actually look at the sort of 80s, 90s reform period as a very brief moment of sunshine in decades of darkness.
It's exception to the norm.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm not sure how that gets fixed.